the thinking behind the program is to upskill and develop our profession's knowledge around inclusive practice, around adaptive teaching to be able to better support people with additional needs.
Yeah, I saw that. I think I saw it advertised on LinkedIn or like posted on LinkedIn, and I thought that's a really good idea. So yes, and Kate's session went really well at the weekend, so I'm sure that'll be invaluable to lots of leaders because there's so much happening that her wealth of experience, she's just saying here, these are the things to focus on. So that could be really, really helpful.
Off call.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. And this week, Elliot Morgan, the news, or education news, I should say. It's good to see you, Elliot. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Fresh off the back of another successful TDAPE London conference.
Yeah, it was massive. And I think TDAPE London has a lot of listeners attended, so it was really good to see everybody. And I'm sure we'll get to that whenever we start to recap what's happened in the last month in TDAPE land. But this is a type of episode format you've been pushing for a long time. You've been very keen to explore what's happening in the world, because I think we all see the big stories and the negative stories, but I think there's a lot of good happening right now in education, and trying to keep that at the fore of our minds really helps. So I think we'll kick off with a segment we're going to call That's the Good News, which is the top stories from this month.
And that's the good news. That's the good news, baby.
And so, Elliot, you've curated these top stories. What is the first story that we should be paying attention to?
So the first couple of stories actually came out on the same day, and they are interlinked. So the first one being around the DfE signalling that there is going to be additional funding for SEND support in England as part of its upcoming white paper. And the schools minister, Georgia Gould, confirmed that the white paper itself will outline what the government is describing as the additional funding for both schools and local authorities to support reforms to the SEND system. And then on the same day, announced the same day, the DfE unveiled that there would be a £200 million professional development programme, which was aimed specifically at ensuring that SEND training is available to all teaching staff, so across nurseries, schools. I think it mentioned further education as well, and that the thinking behind the program is to upskill and develop our profession's knowledge around inclusive practice, around adaptive teaching to be able to better support people with additional needs. And I did read a survey recently. I forget where it was from, but it surveyed ECTs. And the area that they said they felt most unequipped for the job was in supporting pupils with additional needs. So very timely in that sense, this announcement.
As a new teacher, you barely know how to support those teachers or those pupils who don't have additional needs. And they're just sort of flying through on the average trajectory. So yeah, so I can imagine that they do feel that. I mean, when I saw these two, my spider sense went, hold on, isn't there like a £6 billion hole or something there? Maybe that feels like a lot. Isn't there a massive hole? And 200 million doesn't feel like it's even going to touch the sides of what actual schools need. I mean, does that come up in these reports, the actual deficit between what we need and what we're being given here?
I think that number was mentioned. I'm not sure if it's mentioned in these articles, but it has been mentioned in others. And sort of it is yet to be seen how this sort of translates into something tangible as of yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty amazed that we haven't had the SEND white paper yet. We've been waiting for quite a while. I mean, I suppose there has been change of government, but we're over a year into that new government now, aren't we? So I don't know. I'll try not to be really critical, but this does sound really good. I think training for teachers, is always welcome. especially if it's we can guarantee it's going to be of a high quality, um, and if it complements the plans for the new Senko qualification, which I know a lot of people are really excited about. So touch wood, that'll be a positive change, a positive send story, because Lord knows we haven't had many of those recently, have we?
The next story I noticed was around. I'd actually missed this, that the government had announced that this year is the National Year of Reading, and they've branded that under the name of Go All In, I believe. So this idea of it being a year long campaign specifically to tackle the decline in reading for pleasure amongst young people. I'm sure there's a correlation there somewhere between an increase in sort of screen time and social media usage and so on. And I believe the article talked about only 1 in 3 children aged from 8 to 18 said that they enjoy reading in their free time. And then so the government has got many sort of public figures and celebrities to support this. So there's Leah Williamson, the lioness, and had a few authors. So Michael Morpurgo, Julia Donaldson. A Key Stage One book corner wouldn't be complete without a Julia Donaldson book, and then Richard Osman as well. So the idea behind the campaign is to sort of celebrate, expand the view of reading in all forms, to engage families, engage children, and schools and communities through sort of different events and partnerships to help reignite that love of reading across the nation.
How much do you reckon it is because they've been served these almost like nonsense soup books from celebrity authors for quite a while now? Do you think, because do you reckon there's any correlation there, or is it mainly, you think, devices that are stealing our attention, our children's attention?
I would. I mean, I don't have the data to back this up. I would hazard a guess it's leaning more towards the devices, because when you go into shops and you're seeing the number 1 to 10 or top 20 books being sold, it is often those celebrity authors that are dominating those lists. And I know that that can draw critique in the sense of children aren't getting a rich and balanced diet in what they're reading. But ultimately, if those books are popular and their friends are reading those books, they're going to want to read them as well. So, in part, whilst that has been a shallow diet of reading, it has still engaged children in reading. And I guess the next step now is like, how do we propel that further and move children beyond devices, but also into igniting this love of reading across many different genres and different forms.
Those poor celebrity authors catching strays, and a totally unrelated story here. So, I mean, is there anything special happening? Are we doing anything special in schools for it? I mean, people have emailed to say, here's why you should have someone on your podcast during the 2026 year of reading. I mean, what's going to be different? Because every year surely should be the year of reading and mathematics.
I think it talked about it being a partnership between the government and the National Literacy Trust. I'm not too sure what it's entirely going to look like in schools, but it did talk about there being partnerships between like libraries and businesses, different sort of organizations within the community to come together to combat this. So it definitely provides the opportunity to sort of reinvigorate this love of reading. And it talks about, I mean, there's been that talk about the mandatory reading test in year 8, um, and sort of money being invested in supporting reading in secondary schools. So it's good to see that there will potentially be like these national events or local events as well to sort of drive that love of reading in, well, with younger children, but also with secondary age children as well.
Nice. So maybe if anyone's listening and they are doing something for it, let us know in the comments, and we can signpost those over the next 12 months. And did you had one more? Was it about AI and exam marking?
Yes, this so off call. They published so they are sort of related to exams, an examining board, and they published this working paper on the principles of using AI in marking, in terms of like using them to mark qualifications in England. Now they emphasise that AI in its current state couldn't be used as like a sole marker, especially because these are very high stakes exams with GCSEs and A levels and so on. But that there is potential for it to have like a supportive role, like in training markers, in quality assurance and so on. But it talked about like there being principles that need to be maintained, so like fairness, transparency, that there needs to be the public's confidence in what AI is producing. Now, the reason I included it in this segment is because could this potentially down the line lead to a greater, not only a huge reduction in workload for teachers, but also potentially in like around the validity and accuracy in terms of which or how things are graded. So it's obviously we're at the very nascent stages of that journey, but the future looks bright in a sense. And I just thought I'd share this story because it seems like a development in the AI sphere.
When we had the handwriting episode recently, one of our listeners, Matt, got in touch to talk about how I think very soon some examinations are going to be conducted through typing on a computer, and so you would presume that the two here are marrying together in some respect. So yeah, so interesting that Ofqual outlined the principles. So it must mean that we're on the dawn here. Is this like primarily for those examinations where actually, there's some sort of, I don't want to say comparative judgment, but like that deeper level of analysis required within a paper rather than just the tick box that most like maths exams or even the reading and the maybe not the reading, but certainly the spelling, punctuation, and grammar. You could very easily say yes, no, but is this meant to be for going beyond when there's shades of grey within an answer?
Well, because it's like a working paper, I guess it's sort of addressing all areas of it. It talking about how like the current systems lack that true understanding and can currently operate as quite binary, right? Like black and white answers, and it can be very variable. It can be very unpredictable in its outputs. We know that like AI can have hallucinations, and I'm sure listeners, if you haven't already, make sure you're listening to James and Neil's Tadape when they're talking about the sort of AI developments in the education sphere. But the emphasis in the working paper is that they were saying that human judgment has to remain central. That even the implication being that even as AI develops, it cannot ever like truly replace the expertise that we have within our profession. And that it could support like flagging anomalies and things like that, but that the AI currently cannot exercise judgment to the same standard that humans can.
So, I mean, how do you think teachers might feel? For instance, if I know people can't say they're markers, but if any markers are listening, you're thinking my job might be at risk. How do you think they might feel about that and being replaced by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's hard not to read that report or that working paper and consider that. I mean, there's a trade-off there, isn't there? That yes, I mean, as AI does in many spheres, is that it's potentially replacing humans. And there's going to be this trade-off because AI can reduce workload, and it can make things a lot easier for us. But is it something that should entirely replace a human? It's obviously very contentious, and I could understand why those who mark papers may well take this news with some trepidation.
Yeah, so I think all in all, we've got a couple of things for teachers to be aware of because there could be some potential opportunities on the horizon, some things to be a little bit wary of, and then also just a general awareness that this 2026 is the year of reading. So I guess that's the good news.
And that's the good news. That's the good news, baby.
Recently, we've been experimenting with the different types of episodes that we can have on Tadape, what Tadape could be, and what can be really useful for teachers around the world. And part of that, this news episode is an example of that. We're testing the boundaries and seeing what's useful, what's possible, what's interesting, what's entertaining. Now, part of that change is that in the past we have had a no sponsorship policy on Tadape. And I think we're going to, that, and that might have been to the detriment of the podcast growth. I'm a student of the podcast. I did my doctoral studies, and my doctoral research was in the field of podcasting. And as I look, I think that perhaps my sort of hard headedness actually has the potential to restrict the growth of the podcast. And so, in moving forward from 2026 and starting next week, we will be introducing almost not quite a sponsorship tier, because I'm still going to almost act as the gatekeeper for the guests on the show, for the research that takes place in the show. But companies, providers, a range of different groups and people will have the opportunity to request that I conduct certain services. Like, they may ask for a 30-minute episode, which includes one social media post, or they may ask for, inclusion in the newsletter on a Saturday episode, and so there'll be a range of different things that those groups can request. Always, would I use this in my school? Is this the message I want for my listeners, for the Tatape family? Will always remain priority number one. But I do think that there are ways that we can navigate that without being as hard headed as I perhaps have been in the past. But we'll see how it goes. Let me know your thoughts if you have any strong feelings about that, and if not, I hope you enjoy the experimentation and the development of Thinking Deeply About Primary Education podcast in 2026. So, without further ado, back to the episode. So, our next section is called It's Bigger Than That, It's Large. And this is the one story that you think isn't getting the attention it needs and that we should flag right now.
I'm joined by our crisis correspondent, Spartacus Mills. Spartacus, this is huge history happening, isn't it?
It's bigger than that, Chris. It's large. I mean, if you've got a history book at home, take it out, throw it in the bin. It's worthless.
Yes, so the story I picked for this is around the increase in children being homeschooled. So there was new government data that showed that the number of children in England being educated at home has risen by about 15% in the past academic year. So in the year before, it was around 153,000 pupils, and now it's around 176-ish thousand, so a 15% roughly increase in terms of those being recorded as electively home educated. Now, the interesting thing, and the reason why I picked it for this segment, is this idea around inclusion, the implication around inclusion, because in the article, it talked about how a significant share of parents have chosen to pull their children out of school for reasons relating to their children's mental health, the dissatisfaction with provision, or like the belonging and feeling like their child doesn't belong, and that there being a lack of sufficient SEND support. So, is there a trajectory that we're on where we're going to continue to see an increase here? Because that's quite a lot of pupils, especially in a single year increase. And I just thought it was an interesting story regarding that implication around inclusion, and that children feeling like they belonging and thriving, and that inclusion being that twofold thing. It's not just about children belonging in the school, but that they're thriving at the same time.
And that number is massive. I mean, I never would have thought of that. I mean, you can't even quantify that in schools. That's almost like a local authority on its own. Did Sky link to the actual report in their reporting of this news, or was it to be found elsewhere?
No, it just referred to figures published by the DfE show those numbers. Of those numbers, this many cited mental health, but it didn't say specifically which report.
Yeah, so they'll just be reporting the figures and the numbers. They won't be having. There will be nothing else considered. Like any of the external factors. So, interesting. But maybe I'll have a look and see if I can find a report that gives those details. It's probably buried, I reckon, amongst a lot of other stuff. So, I mean, I think I think it does need attention. I think schools will be doing all they can to help all children feeling safe, happy learning, regardless of their situation. And so I don't think anyone takes homeschooling lightly or makes the decision to homeschool lightly, but
Yeah.
perhaps there's a piece there to be done. And I don't know if that comes at on a governmental level. Almost like, I don't know, is mediation necessary? Is it because the relationship is broken down, or is it just because they believe that that's the best thing for their child?
Yeah, and I think an interesting, um, perhaps contributory factor is something worth considering. Is like if COVID hadn't have happened, would that number have been as high? Because obviously many children were at home for long periods of time, and parents were educating them. So you think at least a small but perhaps significant proportion of that number have been children who just stayed home educated since then, um, or have been for a few years, at least.
I mean, I feel like I want to know more about this, so I'm going to see if I can find a group that represents homeschoolers in the UK, because I know there are comparable groups in other parts of the world, but I haven't seen any in the UK. And I'm going to see if we can get them on, and we can chat about this and see what the actual situation is. So I mean, yeah, a really good choice. That is strong. It's bigger than that. It's large for the first edition of this segment.
I'm joined by our crisis correspondent, Spartacus Mills. Spartacus, this is huge history happening, isn't it?
It's bigger than that, Chris. It's large. I mean, if you've got a history book at home, take it out, throw it in the bin. It's worthless.
Our next one is about is Mick is on the telly.
Nick's gonna be on the telly! What? Nick, he's just phoned.
And that means someone we know has been spotted on national/local television. And who is it this week, Elliot?
It is a friend of the podcast, Mr. Lloyd Williams Jones.
This primary school in Maidstone was one of a number who had to close, doing so at 8:15 this morning.
We don't want to close, it's not something we want to do. I think people just think, oh, well, it's just about toilets and things, but it's so much wider than that. It affects cooking, a multitude of different areas in the school.
Lloyd, very, very astutely making a list of things that water is needed for in schools other than cooking. So we've got on our list cooking, toilets. Anything you would add to Lloyd's list of things we need water for?
Yes, I think I would add toilets and toilets again. I think I'm a bit disappointed he didn't mention toilets.
Well, he said it was more than toilets. He said it was toilets and cooking. The essentials.
I've actually not watched it back since the very first time that it was shared with me, but he did intimate that he said people he hasn't spoken to in decades were messaging him in response to it.
It is exactly like that Gavin Stacey episode. He's all, you don't expect to see that at work when you go to work every day, whatever it was. Is that it? So our next new segment is celebrating the return of the blog. And don't call it a comeback.
But tonight, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years.
So these are the best blogs, Substacks, what do you call them? What's the one I use? Beehives, newsletters. The best written word about education of the last month, because I think there definitely has been a resurgence after a big lull for the last 4 or 5 years. So what have you got on your list and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I agree. There has been. I don't know if there's necessarily been a decline in the amount of writing, but there's certainly been a decline in sort of the engagement with it or the accessibility of finding these things. It used to be that we'd get a lot of it from Twitter. And I would say to any listeners who still want to actively engage with reading online, that Substack in particular has been very fruitful in the last few months. Loads of people writing really regularly on there. But that loads of people are still blogging through WordPress and their own websites as well, and keeping an eye out on LinkedIn, on Twitter, to see when people are posting. So the very first person I picked is a rather prolific writer, and I find myself nodding along as I'm reading all of these pieces. They're very in depth, very thought provoking, and that's Carl Hendrick. And the piece I've picked for today is one called "Why Does Thinking Feel So Hard?" So in this piece, he's talking about cognition, and he's connecting sort of cognitive science to our classroom practice, and he's explaining why effortful thinking feels hard and how that can influence how students engage and how that impacts them at learning. And so he's not talking about the sort of subjective experience of effort, about it being like tiring or the energy use associated with it, but actually like the perceived progress of it. So thinking feels difficult when learners can't see that the effort is going to yield results, which can ultimately lead to them pupils like disengaging, even if they can benefit from it. You know, the sort of desirable difficulties that we want to leverage. And then in that piece, he's sort of synthesizing, as he has done in a few pieces recently, like this sort of historical and contemporary thinking around the topic. Another piece that I saw, friend of Tadape presented at Tadape Conf this weekend, Kate Obridge. She has got this great post on her website called "What to Do This Month," and she's basically updating it throughout the year. It's a practical month by month checklist for leaders, like senior leaders, around sort of like management tasks and leadership tasks that school leaders should be planning, completing, thinking about throughout the year. You know, like doing your SEF and doing your safeguarding records and your budgets and so on. But it's a really great post because it's offering a very structured way to stay on top of these like operational responsibilities rather than sort of just reacting to them as they arise. So I think it's particularly useful for anyone who's new to leadership or anybody who needs those sort of clear, actionable reminders because you've got such a busy job and because we're time poor and enthusiasm rich on this show. It helps you to know what to prioritize and when to prioritize it.
Yeah, I saw that. I think I saw it advertised on LinkedIn or like posted on LinkedIn, and I thought that's a really good idea. So yes, and Kate's session went really well at the weekend, and so I'm sure that'll be invaluable to lots of leaders because there's so much happening that her wealth of experience. She's just saying here, these are the things to focus on. So that could be really really helpful. Obviously a lot of time for Carl and his work. I haven't read that post, but I probably will go to now. And now that you flagged it as something worth checking out. You okay if I throw one in before you finish
Go
off
for
your
it. I
last
was
two?
thinking I'm going to stop because otherwise it'll just be me talking for a while.
So mine's maximizing EAL support from the EAL room to the whole school. That's Iva Midifa, I think. Hopefully I haven't butchered her name. But essentially the blog's core argument is that effective EAL provision can't sit in a specialist silo. Perhaps this is more secondary than primary, but I'm not sure. Every school is different, aren't they? And so the sort of premise is that while target intervention has its place, language development is fundamentally social and contextual. So it's happening through everyday classroom talk, peer direction, routine, and relationships. And I've seen that with kids. You see the point where they've sort of almost assimilated because they're starting to twig onto how they can get away with mischief in the class. But essentially, treating EAL something that happens meaning in the EAL room underestimates both where language is actually learned and who's responsible to support it. And this blog reframes EAL as a whole school endeavor, which I think everyone would agree with. And Heddle, who hosted this blog, they're the people, in my opinion, who, if we're not sure about how we can make that whole school endeavor, Dr. Robert Sharples is the person to go to. And I think,
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, his Tadape apps are great. I remember listening to them a couple of years ago, and I know he's done some more recently than that. But yeah, absolutely go back and listen to those. But I think I haven't read this blog yet, but I'm going to go back and read it. But from what the summary you've given of it, I find myself nodding along. I mean, if we're thinking about supporting children who have English as an additional language, it's coming back to that hot term at the moment of inclusion. And if children are outside of the classroom to go and get language support, then they're missing out on loads of rich language inside the classroom as well. So we have that sort of twisted irony, don't we, where we're trying to take children out to better support them, and that we can actually end up excluding them from as you said, the routines, the relationships, the classroom talk that really gives those children a really effective foundation in which they can discuss their learning, but also build their social skills with their peers and with adults in the room. I've got a couple more. I've got another sort of think piece, and then another more practical sort of guidance. So the next one's from David Didal. So again, another prolific writer on Substack, putting out quite a lot of content at the moment. And he had a piece called "The Promise and the Price of Autonomy." I found this really interesting because I think professional autonomy in education is quite a nuanced concept, and he provides quite a nuanced reflection upon it. And I mean, I really would recommend going to read it. I don't think I'm necessarily going to summarize it as well as his thinking is laid out in the blog. But he's essentially getting at why autonomy isn't just freedom to do what you want or freedom from direction. Because often autonomy can be framed that way as like it's complete liberation. I get to do what I want in the class. I get to teach how I want and teach what I want. Um, but without that sort of clear guidance, the frameworks, that shared accountability, we can risk inconsistency in our approach, and therefore the offer that we're giving children in school, it can become quite inequitable quite quickly. So he makes the argument that autonomy should be built through earned. It should be earned through your expertise, um, and but it should ultimately exist within this shared framework of like what we deem effective practice, and there should be like mutual responsibility and accountability within those frameworks.
I'm a really big fan of David's work. I really enjoyed, I mean, the argument within this, but I think I started to read it before I had my first coffee of the day. And you know, the one indulgence he allows himself is the niche literary slash psychological or philosophical references. And I think it was a bridge too far because it was like an existential crisis before coffee is not welcome. I don't think.
Oh, see that one, that wasn't in the autonomy piece. I don't think that was in another piece.
Was that another piece? Oh, maybe this is the one I like because I mentioned. I think there was one
This
right.
one's really good, and then he did one. This is from a few weeks ago, I think, the autonomy one. I mean, I only
Right.
read it myself recently, but then the one I sent in the WhatsApp chat, yeah, this was a month ago, and then the one I sent in the WhatsApp chat was like, I mean, this one probably equally has, but it doesn't have the existential dread bit that I referenced in the WhatsApp.
Okay, so this is the one I messaged him on LinkedIn. Said I thought he'd caught the he'd caught the balance between brevity and really diving deep into this really really well. So I can say this. So I said a
Yeah.
positive thing in person to him or
So
in
the one
message to
he
him.
did is it's linked to autonomy. It was the freedom trap, which was this week.
That's right. Yeah,
They're
that
very
accent,
similar, yeah.
that poem at the start. I was like, oh my goodness, I need more caffeine before I can I can deal with this. And then your last one, you said practical parents' evening.
Yes, so Phil Salisbury, well, philsalisbury.wordpress.com is where I found this, and it was well on Twitter. He goes by AR. I think his handle is like Llewellyn something. Um, Experienced head teacher from what I understand, and in his own words, he introduced it in the post. He's got quite dry humor on social media. He introduced it as dull but useful. And I didn't find it dull at all. I thought it was really interesting to read. It's quite succinct, but it was evidence around Parents' Evening. And I think the title of it was Parents' Evening, What You're Never Told. And quite a central point within it is that he talks about how, um, and this certainly rings true of my experience, no one's ever really told or taught how to run a Parents' Evening. And that we inevitably end up just running it how we had it as pupils. I mean, when I remember sitting in as a trainee teacher, I sat in and watched the teacher who was mentoring me. I watched him deliver parents' evening, and then I ended up just copying his approach, and that was how I always did parents' evening. So yeah, I'd never had explicit guidance around it, but it's worth reading for teachers because it goes beyond generic advice and it offers quite practical, experience-based guidance. He's obviously got a lot of experience in education, and it talks about how to make it a sort of genuinely positive, productive event in the sort of school calendar.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's totally true. And every school has their own different expectations about what to do. I mean, the one rule I always find was, nothing should be a surprise on parents' evening. Because that's when you normally got parents, I mean, as a parent myself, I'd be quite agitated that I was only finding out at that, what normally is within 3 month junctures within the year,
Yeah.
so and yeah, so that was the only rule. But normally my style would be to deliver a doo-doo sandwich, so like it's fantastic. Your child has been coming to school every day. But when they're here,
Yeah, I mean, he referenced in it that like nothing should be a surprise for parents. I mean, we should always be in constant communication with parents, and many schools are with sort of like platforms like Dojo and Parent Mail and all these sorts of things. Um, yeah, I mean, my advice would be to teachers like you've parents want to know not just the academic, like don't just focus on they want to know like the social aspect, like does their child have friends? Are they able to interact with their peers in a positive manner? Um, they want to know about um, beyond the progress, the attainment, and more about the sort of the relationship, social side of schooling as well. So make sure that because often we only have 10 minutes. That was always my experience. Um, to try and cover all of that, so making sure that you're dedicating enough time to talking about their child's well-being and their social side of schooling as well as the academic.
yeah, as a parent, 10 minutes is never long enough. Like, especially when they're online, always run at a time and it just cuts you off straight away. And they're like, well, okay, I can see why it's done that, but that wasn't ideal. But I suppose parents' evening is already long enough, and normally over 2 nights. So I suppose what can you do?
Yeah, I used to have a sand timer, a 10 minute sand timer, and I used to say to the parents, "Look, this is for me, not for you, because I know I'll run over if I don't have this to keep me accountable." And I would say to them, "Look, I'm going to talk at you. I'm just going to tell you everything that I think you want to hear, and then any questions, just hit me with them afterwards, and we can go through them." Because it can be very easy for that time to be eaten up by like them looking at their child's books or asking about something that's like there's a football match on Saturday. What kit do they need and things like that, rather than focusing on like the whole year altogether.
Fantastic. I mean, so definitely the blog, the written word is definitely going. I think you're right. I think it was visibility as opposed to um visibility as opposed to accessibility because lots of people were still writing. I think what Substack seems to do really well is connect you to other people who are similar. And I think Beehive has a similar function because I've seen a
Yeah,
lot of people who are following Jamie Clark's blog and actually need to message them and say, thank you very much for signposting people my way because quite a lot of people have come this way. But it's really good at signposting because I think I started following one and then it was recommended others. Is that your experience too?
yeah. I mean, I haven't used Beehive, but with Substack certainly, because it's essentially its own social media platform, and just like Twitter, or Instagram, whatever, it has a feed, but that feed is exclusively people sharing pieces of writing. So where the issue with people sharing it on Twitter is it gets lost in a sea of adverts and other social content. Whereas with Substack, it's if you want to read things, you go to that, and then all there is loads of content to read. So and that, like, there is really a wealth of great content out there with a lot of regular writers, um, as we've mentioned.
Yeah, and now we've got the chance to signpost those at least monthly as we go forward.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years.
So we've got, I think, just enough time for one final new segment, and that's the recap, which is everything's been happening to Dape this month. I mean, you listened to quite a lot of the episodes, Elliot. Well, is there anything that's really stood out to you in addition to the conference in 2026 so far? I mean, because obviously we're messing with the format. We're doing a lot more Wednesdays. We on the third we had behavior, trust, transparency, leading in challenging circumstances. That was Liv talking about her first year as a head teacher. And then we had Neil and James, AI in schools 2026
Oh, right,
predictions,
I did
policy,
listen
and
to
what
that
might
one.
actually scale. Then we did the review of Tadape conference, Tadape London. Then we had performance doesn't equal learning, and that was me and Stuart doing a recent it was a meta analysis published in the November, which explored digital maths interventions with pupils for pupils who struggle slash had mathematical disabilities. And then at the weekend we had hidden barriers for left-handed pupils. Have you listened to any of those? I mean, or anything that stood out during those?
Yeah, so the one episode that sticks out for me so far this year was Liv Dempsey. I forget the title of it, but she was talking around her leadership journey. And that's particularly fresh in my mind because I went to then also go and see Liv talk about her leadership journey at Tadape Conf this weekend. And I always find it fascinating listening to leaders who are taking on schools and they have a lot of work to do to sort of turn them around. And Liv takes a very frank, very honest approach. She leveraged evidence informed practice, and she's clearly having a very strong, sustainable impact along with her staff in that school for the better. And I, for one, can't wait till she comes back on again in a year's time or 2 years' time, and she reflects even further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might have been her first time. It was definitely her first time speaking at the Tape conference. And so from what I heard, she did a fantastic job. And her episodes are always, like you say, honest, but and really, really useful for her teachers. That was behavior, trust, and transparency leading in challenging circumstances. I mean, it was released on the 3rd of January, so some people may have been in their Christmas ham-induced coma, so they may, be one to go back and check out. I mean, I think I'm really enjoying the work Neil and James are doing on artificial intelligence. So I think they promised the first Wednesday of every term as a minimum they're going to do an episode. And I keep saying to them, give me more pictures of Spider-Man, because I think it's always really interesting to listen to them. They both clearly spend a lot of time developing their expertise, and they're almost mediating in a field in which, every time I post it on LinkedIn, someone will pipe in the power for AI is limitless. And I'm all, well, the proof is in the pudding. Stop spamming my posts because you don't even work in education. So in a world where everything is upside, they are the mediators. But I've enjoyed this year so far. I mean, at the conference, everyone seemed to have a good time. I mean, it's impossible for me to judge because I'm too close to it. But what were the messages you took away from Tazape in London the weekend? With our wonderful hosts in Hawley and Eleanor Palmer.
The big picture ideas and taking away is collaboration. Why collaboration and networking is so important, as it always is with these sort of events. So Live session I talked about. Adam Colbeck and Sarah Cottinghat did a brilliant session on coaching. There's obviously a lot of information out there around like instructional coaching and other forms of coaching, and that's been a very hot topic in the last few years. But they went particularly granular in the style of coaching, and they were talking about mapping out the thought processes to teachers. And Adam showed some videos where he'd filmed teachers and then was showing them the videos of themselves, and they were talking through. And I find it really interesting because when you're in that moment of teaching, your brain is working at a million miles an hour, and there are so many micro decisions that you make that unless you get that opportunity where someone has filmed you and you can reflect on it, it's very hard to remember all of those decisions. And he mapped it quite powerfully with these teachers, and then it got them to, as coaching should, it put the emphasis on the teacher to reflect on their practice rather than it being, and this is a sort of central point of Adam and Sarah's session, that it shouldn't be like, I'm the smart teacher, I'm going to tell you how to teach better. It was getting the teacher themselves to reflect upon their own goal and how the actions they're taking, whether they're meeting those goals or not. So I found that particularly powerful. Laura, I'm not sure if it's McAfee or McPhee. I think it might have been McPhee. She did a really good session on building belonging and psychological safety in teams. I've recently been reading Sam Crome's Power of Teams book, which is brilliant. Anybody who works in teams, I would recommend, or in senior leadership, I'd recommend reading. So that was a really good session, and the idea that like psychological safety is a prerequisite for high functioning teams. And I think about all the teams I've worked in across schools. The high functioning teams are the ones where we feel safe to challenge one another, and you feel like you can be honest, even if you do disagree. And that like conflict and professional disagreement can be very healthy, but there needs to be that basis of psychological safety for that to happen. What about the sessions you popped into? What stuck out for you?
So, I mean, I was a bit restricted because I did the tech support for Katie and Chris twice. I mean, Katie's session was great on supporting people's SEND. It was the main SEND/inclusion session of the day. And yeah, it was just about, how what we know about effective instruction is really impactful for students who have needs and for those who don't as well, so as a bonus. And then I think, the thing that stood out for me is the positivity across the Saturday morning, So like you've got like 100 teachers from 8:30 in the morning to roughly 2:30 in the afternoon, and then even a little bit afterwards. And getting together, sharing their ideas, raises money for charity, and I think we're very, very lucky with the Tadape community is the way it is, because, like I said, people were constantly talking about how positive things were, about how respectful people were, and always say at the start of the day, there's only one rule, and that's be excellent to everyone, and it seems like everyone is. So, I think a massive thank you to the speakers who gave their time and expertise so generously. Massive thank you to the sponsors, to allow us to donate. I think this time it was £1,145 to the Valinder Cancer Centre, and then just to everyone who came along, because I know a lot of listeners are attend the London edition of this, and you could tell because the prior knowledge that people have in sessions is through the roof. You're presenting to a well informed group of people. So, and hopefully I haven't forgotten anybody. Oh, and like I say, yeah, Natalie and Lacey at our host school, massive thank you to them, because I think logistically, everything ran really smoothly. I can't remember what the caretaker's name was, but he was an absolute legend, and he was there from bright and early to support us, and making sure everything ran smoothly. Yeah. So massive thank you to everyone involved. Was it Godfrey for playing? I mean, the caterers were fantastic as well. I mean, Neil's still eating his 10 portions of rice and curry. So can't ask for more than that. And we are back in Merseyside, St Helens, which I'm told is between Liverpool and Manchester, on the weekend of the 20th of March. I think that's the Saturday, and we'll be doing announcements for speakers and for tickets, which are already on sale, in the next couple of days. So if you went at Saturday and thought, oh, I could speak, then do sign up for Merseyside. I think we're calling it Northwest, Tadape Northwest. Or if you just want to come along, another fantastic day. So you thought we'd only do 20 minutes, Elliot, but we have done the best part of an hour on the news. So it's probably lucky this is only once a month, or otherwise we'd be spending a lot of time on this call. All I have to do is say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, Elliot.
Thank you for having me. See you next time.
And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.